Let's start. Good friends. One from Germany, but now in Taiwan, Dr. Angus Stanzel, and also Professor Dr.冯仲平in Beijing. Both are China expert and a European expert. Now let's talk about the just finished China visit of the German Chancellor Olaf Scholz. Talking about the bilateral relationship between Germany and People's Republic of China, I mean, it has been a very good relationship. It is still a very good relationship, but it used to be, I might be wrong, Zhongping can correct me, for a long time, particularly during the time of Angela Merkel, it used to be the best bilateral relationship between China and Western countries. We didn't have any geopolitical problem, conflict, and Angela Merkel, for the period of time of 12 years, she was 13 times in China. At average, more than once in a year, she came to China. But now in the recent years, things has changed, partially due to the pandemic, partially due to the global geopolitical, the worsening of geopolitical problems. Now it has been almost 2.5 years after the new German government has been in the office. If we try to compare what happened almost 2.5 years ago, I clearly remember that it was the 8th of December 2021 when Olaf Scholz came to the office. One big party is SPD and two small party, one is Green Party, the other one is FDP. And during that time, the policy, even if the China strategy was very late, came out last year, but it was the case that the more or less the consensus in Germany, or on the side of the coalition, was try to decouple from China. Particularly, I clearly remember what Robert Habeck used to say. Due to the lesson from Russian-Ukraine war, Germany has to make its economy to be decoupled from Chinese economy before 2027. Why? Because they assume after 2027 China is going to attack Taiwan, and they definitely Germany will be joining the Western countries to sanction China, and the price of sanctioning China will be lower. That was the proposal, proposed by Robert Habeck. But if we compare what was the case, over the course of last 2.5 years, and now this time when Olaf Scholz came to China, the tone was totally different, or more or less totally different. Now this time, Olaf Scholz, asked Chinese government to treat the German firms, German business in China fairly, which means 2.5 years ago, or over the last 2.5 years, at least the then German coalition was thinking of decouple from China, but now this time they asked to come to China, but asked for the better treatment, for the fair treatment, and not to mention this time there was still a huge delegation, huge business delegation, which was a case, over the last 30 years, which has been a tradition. But this time, for the reason I mentioned before, this time was very rare, good, and also there are some simple points we can talk about. But particularly, I also think maybe we can go to the details. I will be stopped very soon. I just try to opening. There are a few themes on the agenda of our Scholz. One is Taiwan. The other is no China support for Russia, and traditionally still the human rights, and also some other things. But last but not least, that was the theme which was also proposed by during the Yellen's visit to China. The American Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen was just in China, and when she was in China, she proposed a theme overcapacity. 3 new industries. One is electronic vehicle, the other one is solar cell, the last one is lithium battery. The 3 major industry, 3 major new industries. It looks like the way of Olaf Scholz to deal with these 3 major industries was slightly or largely different to what the United States has been dealing with these 3 new industries. On Monday, that was 3 days ago, Olaf Scholz was in the Tongji University. That was the alma mater of my university. I graduated from Tongji University. When she was in the Tongji University, she was talking with the students of that university in German. She proposed the 3 conditions. He proposed the 3 conditions. He said, basically, he said, at certain stage, we will be welcome the Chinese electronic vehicle to be on the German market. But under 3 conditions. First of all, no dumping, yeah. And secondly, no overcapacity. And thirdly, it has to be, the intellectual property has to be respected. I was commenting, I think, okay, these 3 conditions sounds good. But these are all the 3 conditions which Chinese side and the German side can negotiate, can talk about. That wasn't the case like when Janet Yellen came to China and said, hey, you guys, you got to stop this. You got to solve the problem without any condition. As long as you put your condition on the table, then people can start to talk about it. And then on Tuesday, she met Xi Jinping, she met Li Qiang, she met number 1 and number 2 on the Chinese side. Yesterday, on Wednesday, we received the news saying, hey, China will be opening the more import of German beef, German apple, and more German pork. China will be increasing import from the German side, which definitely was a signal. I think that was a signal as a response, at least partially as a response to these 3 conditions. And not to mention that the Chinese president, when he received Olaf Scholz, he said, okay, export of these 3 major industries, that would be good, that would be beneficial for European market and so on. Yeah. Okay, anyway, let me stop here. I mean, overall, the bilateral relationship is still okay. Not so good anymore, like 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago. But compared with 2 years ago, compared with 2.5 years ago, it is better now. Particularly, there was a huge German business delegation, which means German economy, German business cannot afford the price to be decoupled from the Chinese market. But of course, the geopolitical conflict and ideological difference, value differences are still existing, maybe are still increasingly. But last but not least, the way of dealing with 3 major industries from the German side was largely different to the way of how American side has been dealing with it, particularly in terms of the three conditions proposed by Olaf Scholz, as I mentioned before. And also yesterday, China responded in a quite positive way. Of course, this will be also a pressure to the United States. I already heard from the United States. United States, hey, Germany, you guys, you have to be careful not to be divided by China. China is now using the 统战, the front. How to say it? The United Front. United Front strategy to divide between United States and Germany. Germany, you guys, you got to make a standpoint. Anyway, that will be the response from the side of the United States. That will be also quite interesting to see how the interaction between Germany and the United States will be. Okay, let me stop here. How you guys will be seeing this.
I would very much like to hear Angela think about Angela, please, you start.
Okay, I start.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, I start.
When I always name Angela, I always say Angela Merkel. No, this time it's not Angela Merkel.
Now you remember Angela Stanzel. I'm still active.
Genau. Yeah, exactly. Please.
All right. So, I mean, I agree with you, Peter, that the relationship now looks a bit better than 2.5 years ago, which was, of course, mainly due to COVID. And at that time, we realized how damaging it can be if we don't meet each other personally, but trying to talk to each other virtually, at least on the highest level, didn't really work. I think on our level, on conference level, you can still have discussions, but on the highest level, it was very difficult to maintain a proper dialogue. So I think COVID was, of course, one of the reasons why the relationship or why it was so difficult to talk to each other, to say it like this, because, of course, I agree with you as well that there were other reasons for the relationship to suffer. For Germany in particular, I think even before COVID, the dissatisfaction with the lack of market access or the lack of level playing field. This is no news that the German business community criticized this increasingly. Nevertheless, of course, as we see today, the interest, at least from some German industries in the Chinese market, is still very high. And this is why we saw Scholz arriving with a big business delegation, and in addition to the business CEOs, also with 3 ministers from the different parties from the coalition government in China. So I think the purpose of this visit was from the beginning very obvious. It was trying to resume the economic relationship with China, in particular the economic relationship, to ensure that our companies can still make business in China, that maybe some of the regulations we can clarify, for instance, the data transfer. This was, I think, or this still is in Germany, a huge topic, how our companies and finance institutions can operate in China under new data regulations laws. So I think that was the main purpose of this visit. And of course, as you mentioned, Scholz also addressed Russia and Taiwan. But this was, I think, on the lowest part of the agenda, even though he made it appear maybe differently. And if you have followed the German or European social media in the past days, you will also see that this was the biggest criticism against Scholz coming out of Europe, that he did not actually properly address the Ukraine war. He tweeted himself, Scholz tweeted himself that he asked Xi Jinping to help to try to stop this, I think he says something, a catastrophic war or crazy war, something like this. But he asked for it, but he never tweeted what kind of promises he might have gotten from Xi Jinping, except maybe saying, yes, we want peace too. But what is China going to do exactly? That was obviously not the essence of his talks with Xi Jinping. Neither was Taiwan, by the way. So I think for me, it's very clear. It's about trying to address the dumping issue, the conditions you have mentioned, Peter, the dumping, the overcapacity, etc. But again, if you follow the German media in particular, you will see that Scholz was also heavily criticized for actually not getting any concessions on this. He addressed it and he named the conditions, but apparently the response from Xi Jinping was that there is no overcapacity and that the dumping is not really there because we still profit so much from buying cheap electric vehicles. So it seems, at least from the outside, not having been in the delegation and not having been in the room with Xi Jinping and Scholz, it seems from the outside that Scholz addressed maybe a lot of topics, but very nicely, and he didn't achieve much. And I think the biggest criticism that came out of Germany, at least, or other European countries, was that if we compare Scholz with Merkel, Merkel was also had the business community's interests in mind, very much so. She also was a chancellor during a different time when all these geopolitical tensions were not that high as they are now. But she managed always a very nice balance between addressing Germany's concerns in terms of human rights, for instance. She also went to Tongji to address the students, and she remembered at one occasion her time living in the GDR as a GDR citizen and the kind of feeling she got when the GDR, when the wall came down, the Berlin Wall came down, and she experienced something like freedom. I mean, she had a very smart way to address the issues important to her. And I think this is something people are missing from Scholz. At least to the Germans, to many Germans, he seems to be too soft, way too soft, when he talks to big leaders such as Xi Jinping. Then just small footmarks, the proposal on decoupling. I mean, this was nothing that Germany really at any point officially wanted. We actually, since Trump was elected, always emphasized that we do not want decoupling. And it's still our policy today. And then we talked for a while about diversification, that we want to diversify, which meant in addition to our market in China, we wanted to explore other markets, which is to some degree actually happening when we look at our ministers visiting Indonesia and Thailand and Vietnam and so on. You can see they are exploring really the option of having different markets for the German economy. But also, of course, we have to admit there's no market the size of China. So China is still our main market. So decoupling was never really what we wanted. And then later on, as you know, Ursula von der Leyen came up with the term of de-risking, which is something the US are now using as well, right? Because it's such a nice open term, and everyone can define it in a way they want to. I mean, if we listen to some of our CEOs in Germany, we now understood that they understand de-risking, that they localize more in China. You know, they move their R&D centers to China as to de-risk from whatever is happening with the US, for instance, which is not what von der Leyen had in mind. And when you talk to the American politicians or think tankers, you get a clear feeling that for them, de-risking is still very much linked to decoupling. You know, but it's a nice term that everyone is happy using at the moment. But of course, the issue is that we need a more precise understanding on what it actually means. And then one last point before I hand over to Feng Zongping, and I'm very curious what you will respond to what I said. But you said, Peter, that Germany cannot afford decoupling from China, which is something I think we know, we are aware of. But of course, China also cannot afford decoupling from Germany or from the European market. This is, Huxiang, it's vice versa. So that's also something I think we need to keep in mind. And I will stop here for now, and I look forward to the discussion.
Okay, thank you, Angela. Zongping, now the podium is yours.
Peter, thank you so much for bringing us together. And it was really nice to see Angela again. This is our first video dialogue in the past 3 or 4 years, yeah?
Yes.
Yeah. I remember when the Ukraine crisis conflict took place. We had also video, a meeting, online meeting. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Peter, Angela, I think, why I wonder why Chancellor's visit, Scholz's visit, in the so, a lot of people's, attracts a lot of people's attention. I think there are 2 or 3 reasons. Number one is, this whole European perception, European environment about China, about Russia, about the United States, it's changing rapidly. People, are thinking about the election in the United States. A lot of Europeans are worried about this. I was in Paris, Hungary, 1 month ago. People keep on asking, all these issues. Secondly, for Germany, I think, this is, although Chancellor Scholz made a visit after the coalition was, established. He did this in November 2020. he was, being recognized by Chinese media as the first Western countries leader, first G7 leader, following the Party 20 Congress, Party Congress 20. And he was also, I'm pretty sure he was the first European leader after the COVID to visit Beijing.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, in Beijing, the COVID restriction has not totally lifted yet. Right. I remember his airplane stopped, and he left. He came. He left the airplane went to Seoul, South Korea. Can you believe that?
Right. He came to Beijing only for 11 hours.
Yes, and the airplane didn't stop in Beijing.
Right.
Yeah. The airplane went to South Korea, Seoul, and 10 hours later, the airplane came back to pick him up.
Exactly. That was the 4th of November.
That is an extraordinary time,
Exactly.
People will remember this in history, But that time, that visit, I couldn't call it a normal visit because he has only one purpose. No more, no less. He wants to come here to talk to Chinese leaders. Nuclear war is so bad. We must stop. We even cannot think about this. That he got only single message, and he did it. And he went back. He told the Germans, "Okay, I did it. I made this agreement with Chinese leader. We both think we both oppose. The two countries oppose any potential, possibility of having a nuclear war." This time, people also want to know. The coalition published a paper on China. This is an unprecedented paper. In the past, Germany has a lot of Chinese policy, but they never written down.
Yeah.
And last year they did.
Yes.
And that paper was in, when people who think China-Germany is a good relations, you also pick up some passages, sentences. If you want to think China-Germany relations is very bad, you has a lot of also paragraphs. So it's a contradiction paper. I can imagine, various departments, various people, officials, have different views. So they made a compromise and managed to, to publish the sounds like a unified paper, but far from a unification at all. And this trip is a test. People want to know, what is this really the new government? Peter mentioned it's already 2 years and a half. What is this new government? Coalition government's China policy is. So I am, closely followed Schwartz's trip in Chongqing, in Shanghai, in Beijing, and the discussions with it. I try to figure out what is really Germany's, at least the Chancellor himself and his team thinking about Germany's relations should be with China. My conclusion is maybe wrong. My conclusion is, okay, Angela is right, Peter is right. No decoupling. That is probably most stupid policy. And let me tell you, China is number 2, Germany is number 3 world economy. And can you imagine we are having a decoupling policy between us? So we both need each other. I agree with you, Angela stressed this point. We both need each other. Second, on Ukraine crisis, or Middle East crisis, or climate change, there are AI, all these issues. Can we do this by ourselves? Even Germany, even European Union. Can European Union as a whole to manage it, to solve this issue, address this issue? No. And facing divided United States itself, inside, divided us. And I think China, European Union, China, Germany need each other not only on trade economic issues, but also on global issues. I can understand people maybe criticize Schwartz about his remarks on Ukraine crisis, but from my point of view, I saw Xi Jinping made a long discussion. Watching this news, Chinese Central Television News, at least 50% his talk with Schwartz is about Ukraine crisis, and the rest is business, commercial, trade relations. And this is our Euro, because I think because Xi Jinping understands Ukraine crisis, Russia-Ukraine conflict is the #1 issue for Europeans. This is the most headache. So any European leaders come to Beijing, I think they have this very heavily in their mind. So she, again talked about what is our position and how can we try to manage to do this. And I followed this Foreign Office Wei Jiaobu's spokesperson's yesterday's speech. He said he made some response on how China think about the upcoming negotiation in Switzerland. Peter, this is definitely the outcome of Schwartz's visit. We can link this up. I think Schwartz definitely asked China to do more. So to be fair, I think Europe wants to China to do more. I think this is definitely Schwartz in Schwartz's mind.
Okay.
So sorry.
You mean the Chinese state president has promised Olaf Scholz something in terms of how to help Europe to whatever. I
think China understands the Europeans' concerns, and China wants to do more to help to solve this issue. This is for certain, for sure.
Okay, but how? Do you know some details?
I don't know details. Like Angela, I'm not in the office, in the room.
You're very close to the room. You're sitting just outside of the room. Okay, Angela, that will be a very good signal, very good news, or a very important signal. I mean,
if China participates in the peace talks?
I think China will have a positive gesture about this. Yeah.
Yeah.
That is my personal guess.
Yeah. I mean, I think the rumors could be true. All the newspapers are reporting on the potential that China is thinking about participating in the talks. The question, of course, will be under what conditions China would consider taking part in the talks. In the past, China has always emphasized that any peace talks can only happen with both parties.
That's true.
Ukraine and Russia, which of course is close to impossible. At least it has been until now close to impossible to get the two parties on the table. So I think we will see. I think the criticism that we have seen related to Scholz's Ukraine or Russia talks with Xi Jinping are in particular in regard to not addressing China's support to Russia. Because there's this one side of the coin that China understands European concerns. I believe that because Europeans talk about almost nothing else since the last years than about Ukraine. So that is one side of the coin to understand our concerns. and to maybe also assure Europeans to help somehow. But that's why I was saying, actually, after all this time, now we need to go beyond the words and see some deeds. And the only deeds we have seen, at least from the Chinese side, according to the sources we have available, is that China has been increasingly supporting Russia, not with delivering lethal weapons, of course, but there are a lot of other ways to support also Russia's war against Ukraine, starting from the economic relationship, but also, there have been reports about dual-use equipment that China has delivered to Russia. So I think this is what the criticism we have seen now on the social media and the European media and so on is actually about, that Scholz was not adamant about addressing this issue, and that he was satisfied with some loose assurances by Xi Jinping. And also in regard to his first visit to China, the one you mentioned in November 2022, he traveled to China with that one purpose of getting the concession of Xi Jinping to divert or to talk to Putin about not using nuclear weapons. But that was actually, in my view, in my personal view, a very low-hanging fruit, because Xi Jinping has mentioned that before, that he does not support any use of nuclear war. That was not a new thing when Scholz visited to China for China to say. China has been actually saying this since a while, which was, of course, also very reassuring to the Europeans, that at least the kind of, that worst scenario China would not support. But I don't see it as such a big success by Scholz from his first China visit. But okay, that's my personal view.
Okay. Let me go to a bit details, because evils are in details, as we always said in English. Okay. Zhongping, you said China will be participating in a peace talk of Ukraine conflict. That was a good signal, and that was even linked to the talk between Chinese state president and Olaf Scholz. But according to what we read on the media, or at least know in advance, is Germany. What Germany hoped was that China will reduce its help, its dual use, in German we say dual use of some facilities, like not necessarily in a sense of weapons, but in a sense of cars or trucks, which can both use for military purpose and for civilian purpose. That China can reduce those facility help for Russia. But that was, to my understanding, was slightly different to what you mentioned before, because China has promised in participating in peace talk. That was always the tradition of Chinese purpose, of Chinese position. In February of last year, Chinese Foreign Ministry proposed 12 points of political solution for Ukraine. Ceasefire, immediate start with peace talk. But that was not linked to what Olaf Scholz hoped. And Angela, you mentioned at the very beginning, in terms of Russia, in terms of Taiwan, that was the lowest, and you used the wording, that was the lowest part of agenda, which sounds for me, Olaf Scholz was in a very low profile in mentioning this issue to state president. Why so low? And for Zhongping is the question: did China responded to any request from Germany, not necessarily in terms of peace talk, but in terms of reduction of dual use of helps for Russia? Okay,
Angela, your foot. Angela.
Yeah. Why so in low?
Okay, so on Scholz, I think it has become quite clear in the last 2 years. I think actually from the beginning, Scholz took office, that he that he planned to continue Merkel's policy. So he came as a chancellor with a promise of continuation. So the balance I mentioned that Merkel managed so well with China, and on the one hand, flourishing economic relations, but on the other hand, also keeping her, keeping solidarity to her values and so on. I think Scholz intended to continue this, but then things changed. Scholz became a chancellor at a time what you cannot even imagine back then. One thing came after the other, the COVID and then Ukraine, and I think still that he's still trying the continuation policy of Merkel, but in a different time, and it just doesn't fit anymore, at least from the view of many people, not all of people in Germany, but that is the reason why he's being criticized so much by some people. And I do believe that from the first moment he came into office, the German industry was very afraid that he would not pay enough attention to the industry's interests. So from the first moment, they have been knocking on his door and putting him under pressure to consider their interests. And of course, this pressure has increased tremendously since Ukraine, because the German industry had to leave Russia and they lost the Russian market. And as you know, since Ukraine started, at least in the Western media, or if I look at Europe, there has been constantly this parallel made between Ukraine and Taiwan. That is something you mentioned also, Peter, this, this fear, the angst, that something like Ukraine could happen in Asia between China and Taiwan. And of course, this is something our industry is scared of tremendously, because the Russian market was nothing compared to the Chinese market. So the thought of losing the Chinese market for some reason is very big. And this is why I think, and then, you have the economic slowdown during COVID, also combined with this angst, where the German industry also took some hits. And then due to Ukraine. So the Chinese market, to some industry leaders, not all of them, but in particular the big ones, and we all know the names, I think, of the big companies that I'm talking about, is that they need China in the future and currently more than ever before. And this is why Scholz is being pressured by those CEOs, and this is why he has been traveling to China now for the second time with a huge number of industry CEOs in order to make deals in China. So I think this is the reason why from the view from Germany, when we saw his visit and his agenda, it looked like, a Merkel visit, where the most important things are business and economic relations. But forgetting that, of course, we are living in a very different time with a very different security threat. So I think this is the kind of issue that a lot of Germans take, that we have the feeling he's forgetting a lot about the geostrategic or geopolitical issues that are also challenging us. And I do believe that in some ways Scholz is driven by angst, actually, that he is afraid that, because we already have Russia as a huge challenge, the biggest challenge since the Second World War, as we always mention, that is challenging our security, not only Ukraine, but the whole European security, actually. And he's afraid that Putin could actually go to the worst and attack NATO allies or make use of nuclear weapons. So that's the one side. And on the other side, I think he also is afraid that we could lose the Chinese market, that, in the end, our companies have no more to invest and no more to make business. So I think in many ways, he actually is driven by a lot of angst. And in that regard, I think, Peter, you were right.
Okay, you use some words which are quite impressive for me. One is Olaf Scholz was pressed by some German CEOs, and also he was internally a lot of criticized that he was forgetting some geopolitical tension or political tension or whatever, suppressed and forgetting. So which remind me I'm an old man. which reminded me to 30 years ago. You mentioned Merkel's visit, which reminded me to even Helmut Kohl's visit to China 30 years ago. There was a very famous slogan which was always internally criticized by German media. German media are always critical.
That's true.
Which is okay. Wandel durch Handel. Wandel durch Handel, change through trade. That was a slogan proposed by Helmut Kohl. Helmut Kohl, he was always very, very silent, very in low profile in admitting the distance list to Chinese leadership 30 years ago. Very, very low profile. Oh, this is a list of Chinese citizens which you need to release, but not in the high profile. And then in a very high profile, he was doing business. And back to Germany, he was telling the German media and German people, what I was doing is Wandel durch Handel. Change through making trade. So is this still the same? I mean, what I was describing, that was the case 30 years ago, 3 decades ago. That was a golden time between China and Germany, between even globally. That was a golden time. But now a lot of things has changed. In China, a lot of things have changed. On the side of Western, a lot of things have changed. And also Germany has changed. Over the course of last almost 2.5 years, we have huge coalition, SPD, Green, and FDP. And internally, within the coalition, there was a huge disagreement. I don't know how the consensus is moving on. Is there any consensus towards China? I mean, between SPD on one side, I mean, the Chancellor's office, and also the Green Party, Annalena Baerbock, Robert Habeck, and FDP. FDP is still very low profile, but FDP has been always very, very China critical as well, but not so much China critical as Green. But is there any consensus within the coalition in how to deal with this country, China, which we cannot afford to decouple anyhow, but which has changed a lot? Is no more the China 30 years ago, and even no more the China 15 years ago. We need the country, but we have to deal with the country in some other ways. So, I mean, this has puzzled me a lot. I don't know. Maybe Zhongping can contribute a lot. He is a European expert on the Chinese side. Angela.
Okay. I will do it shortly because I am also curious to hear what Feng Zhongping has to say. But just on the consensus, it's something that Zhongping has also mentioned about the China strategy, right? And I think what it shows us is that there is the broad consensus among, I would say, the 4 parties in Germany, the CDU as an opposition, but still very strong opposition. The broad consensus among our 4 most important parties is that we need China, right? You also mentioned the need to tackle global issues together and the economic mutual dependencies. But what we do with it, this is where, as you said, the devil lies in the details. This is where the parties start to drift apart. Should we be more tough towards China? Should we criticize it more? Should we pressure our industry more to actually really diversify? Or should we encourage them to invest more in China in the long-term future? This is where every party has really their own understanding and definition. And this is why the China strategy appears sometimes maybe contradictory. But I think overall, the agreement is we need China. And we are living in a more difficult time with China, and China has become a much more difficult partner. I think this is also a broad agreement, but how to manage the relationship with this big, important, but also more difficult partner, this is where the disagreement is. And then very quickly on the Wandel durch Handel thing, I think in a lot of people have called it dead, the concept in recent years. They said it didn't work, it's dead, which I personally don't agree, because of course we keep on trading with countries such as China, but also others. And of course, some changes can happen from that trade, even though they might be unintentional or not been seen and so on. But for me, this concept isn't dead. But what Scholz has been emphasizing to the German public now is not this, but that he is pursuing a pragmatic trade. So you could say this is the new German slogan.
Yeah. Oh, it is is a new German slogan. Okay, Chongping.
Okay, for myself, I have been always compare what is the Europeans' approach towards China, what is the United States' approach. Right. Okay, United States, you have Biden's approach, you have Trump's approach. And in Europe sounds like have a unified approach, but this is not true. Angela, you know there are probably 27 approaches as well. But Germany is a different country. We have a lot of reasons to think Germany is an influential power in Europe, at least. What Scholz is doing will definitely have a spillover influence on others. Others say, look, if Germany can do business with China, why not Belgium? Why not Hungary? Why not Romania? So I'm always emphasize two countries in Europe, their rules, special rules. One is France, one is Germany. Yeah. Germany, if Germany thinks, Chinese market is so important, we need Chinese market. Okay, Peter, if we have frictions, I treat them as a normal phenomenon. Mm-hmm. Two big economies have such a deep interaction without friction, impossible. So let's solve them in business way. Let's make negotiations. Let's make some compromise. You cannot get completely, you win other powers, partners. You need to both to make compromises. Whatever frictions, to have a trade war is the last thing we want to say. So I'm glad Chancellor came to raise some issues. We want to solve them. I think this sounds like a normal, and this is also an ideal approach. So I'm really after watching his trip, following his trip, I get a sense maybe we cannot come back to the Peter's phrase golden period of time, but still we can move on, and we still can keep on doing business with each other. We still can, making cooperations in areas which we have mutual interest. So that is the most positive message I think Scholz's trip have sent to the world, to China and to Europe. One more point is, I want to ask Angela. De-risk is indeed, it's a very nice term, but with a lot of ambiguous. Everybody can say this, for us, this is de-risk. And the degrees can be so totally different. And Peter made a very most important point at the very beginning. You mentioned, Taiwan issue. In some people's mind, that is the big, big risk. Can be compared with the Ukraine crisis. If West united to have a section, that is indeed a risk. That is a huge risk. If you have a company, you invest in a country, and suddenly, this waste we invest is going to nothing. And my point is still this is a mentality thinking in some people's Germans' mind. Angela is in Taiwan at the moment. I think this only one thing can lead to this war is someone making crazy independence announcement. Is that right?
Yeah. So I think, de-risking, I think, first of all, of course, you're right. It's so ambiguous, right? And I think there was a recent poll by the European Chamber of Commerce in China, which showed that 1/3 of the European companies understand de-risking as localizing in China, as I have described before, and 1/3 describe de-risking as actually going to other markets, maybe even leaving China. And then 1/3 just stay where they are. They don't change anything. So you have these 3 different kind of approaches. So anyway, about China, I think now also, because I'm here, I can tell you that independence is nowhere to be discussed. So this is not the risk. The Taiwanese will never do something like this. There will be no change of name. I think Lai Ching-te, the future president, who will be inaugurated on 20th of May, he will continue Tsai Ing-wen's policies of low profile and trying to be very diplomatic. And I think he's very aware that he has a bad reputation in Beijing because he used to be pro-independence. But I don't think this is anywhere near reality. This is a red line that Taiwan would never, ever cross. So this cannot happen. But of course, looking from Germany, and I can tell you that since Ukraine, the requests I get from the German media, from universities to speak, from conferences, from think tanks, from the business community as well, is 90% is about Taiwan. They want to know more about cross-strait relations and what is happening. And of course, in the end, they want to know not could Taiwan declare independence, but they want to know what could trigger China to invade Taiwan. What could be a moment for China to consider an invasion? Because Xi Jinping has announced Taiwan to be reunified by 2049. And then you do the math. If you are in Germany, they like numbers, so they start doing the math and they think, okay, he's like 70 years old, maybe. How much he wants to do it in his lifetime? Maybe by the time he's 80. So does it mean he wants to attack Taiwan in the next 10 years? So I'm just telling you what I hear in Germany when I have these discussions or when I'm invited to talk to the German public or the German business community. And I think the other issue that, or the other concern that Germans have is maybe not so much about this full-out invasion, because we also hope that any other country can see now with Ukraine that it's not that easy to conduct an invasion, even if it's a big country against a small country. It's not war is war. There is a high price to be paid on both sides in terms of lives, but also in terms of political risk and economic losses. So I think the hope is that no other country will repeat this. But beside this invasion scenario, I think what is also worrying Germans is the possibility of an accident. Because we see Chinese vessels, Chinese fighter jets coming closer and closer to Taiwan. And then, of course, we also observe US and Chinese encounters in the South China Sea. Or now we have the tensions with the Philippines. And the worry is, because we know from our own history, I think Peter was saying in German at the beginning when we were waiting for the time, that he is reminded very much of the situation in Europe before the First World War. And it's something that happened by accident, actually, right? So we know that accidents can happen and accidents can lead to a catastrophe. So I think this is the other reason why Germans are taking so much interest in what is happening in the Taiwan Strait. But I would say it's not only the Taiwan Strait, it's also the South China Sea. It's what we call like overall Indo-Pacific now. And it's one of the reasons, the Germans are sending a ship. They have sent a frigate, Bayern, 2 years ago. They are sending another one now, not because I think they expect to make a difference, but to show some symbolic support to the region and to express the security concerns. I don't know if it answered your question. It was a very long answer, I know.
Okay, obviously, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So, Angela, can we describe Scholz's visit is, to a certain degree, is a return of pragmatic relationship, pragmatic approach, comeback from Germany's point of view? Can we say that?
Yes, I think from the Chancellery's view, you can definitely say that. But as you also pointed out, we have a three-party coalition, and they are not in agreement. And I would say that the Green Party and FDP are also to some degree pragmatic, but they also have a high regard to values, and they are somewhere in a dilemma with SPD. So this is why we have a very complicated constellation at the moment, with a lot of fighting and a lot of compromises. As you said, Zhongping, before, there's a need for business negotiations. This is what is happening in Berlin every day. Compromises, fighting, compromises, fighting. So from the Chancellor's view, I agree with you. I think he has turned to a very pragmatic approach.
My understanding is, trade, investment, commercial relations is so important a part of our relationship between China, Germany, and China as a whole, Europe as a whole. But the difference between now and the past is we have a Ukraine crisis. People will tend to think, okay, what China can do. And we have this also ideological friction, as well. So and also we have this U.S. factor. People will think so. It's not a come back to old time. It's probably still the same, but with different time. I agree with you on that point. Yeah.
What about, can I ask you, Zhongping, about your assessment on the US? Because this is surely something China is following very closely. Well, how do you evaluate if Trump would be reelected? How would the Sino-American relationship evolve? Will it go back to trade war, or,
if Trump come back, I think China and Europe can have more understandings, more common understandings. This can be another element for cooperations between China, Germany, and China, Europe. China, I think we have already experienced the worst period of time during his term. Trade war, technological war, whatever, Chinese students, Chinese consulate was closed. I think people at the beginning thought Joe Biden maybe have a different approach. Actually, it's a different style. So I think China has a more realistic approach now against the upcoming US election.
So China would prefer Biden to win.
According to what he said, maybe at least he personally prefers more Trump, right?
Well, I don't know.
So that China will have at least when Trump come back, China, Germany agenda will have one more element.
But I think if Trump actually restarts his trade war against China, then the whole global trading system needs to be restructured, actually.
That is one point. The other is the European security environment. I think that is also, very alarming for me, if Trump come back. And he's thinking about the NATO, it's a very problematic problem for Europeans. Right.
So for us, it's very straightforward. We want Biden to win.
Yes, maybe even if Donald Trump comes to power, maybe he will even withdraw from NATO. That would be a disaster for European countries in terms of which country can provide with nuclear umbrella, right? That would be a...
I heard from some American friends say Trump have no power to dissolve the NATO, but he can make NATO more difficult to do anything which Europeans want to do.
Exactly. And I think in the best scenario, he will, of course, pressure the Europeans to invest much more on defense and security. So
Angela, do you think that is a crisis which can push Europeans to go further on common defense building?
Yes, I do think so. I mean, that would be actually, considering Trump and the announcements he has made, that would be the best scenario. You know, that he again blackmails us basically and says, you know, we will withdraw from Ukraine if you don't invest more, and then we will invest more because we cannot have Ukraine fail. But of course, the danger is that he will be completely irrational and, you know, deny any help to Ukraine no matter what we do. So that's the worst, one of the worst scenarios.
My argument is, if you want European integration go one more step, further step, you need one crisis. And the Ukraine crisis is not enough, because if you have US, you have NATO.
Yeah.
For Europeans, that's not such a crisis. But if NATO, if US change his mind, that is a crisis.
Oh, yes.
That crisis will be big enough to Europeans to say, look, we have a common market, we have a common currency, we need a common defense.
Yes, I agree. Yeah.
You mean the common European defenses decoupled from the United States?
They will not announce like that. They will say we still need US. We still have a coalition, not a coalition.
Have the US bases. We still need cooperation with US.
But they will do everything for the worst. The worst is US decoupling, not European decoupling. US decoupling.
Right. And then it's largely up to French President Macron to say to what extent he will be following his policy, strategic autonomy.
Oh yeah.
Right. Strategic autonomy.
Yeah. In the past 2 years, 3 years, people joke him, talking about the strategic autonomy. But now, when Trump came back, people think Macron is right.
Yes,
right. Exactly. Yeah, exactly. I agree. Yeah. Oh, that would be very interesting. Yeah. Okay. Before we come, talking about bilateral relationship between China and Germany, you guys, you seems to be quite optimistic. But let me give you one warning. Before we become optimistic, let's try to clarify some details. Yeah, because I used to be a journalist. Journalists always dig into details. First of all, in terms of internal China policy within the German administration, within the German coalition, Angela, is there any more or less consensus between these three parties? Because the Green Party used to be very difficult. Angela Baerbock.
Annalena.
Okay. Oh, yeah. Annalena Baerbock. But now, recently, at least in terms of in dealing with China, she has become quite silent, in low profile. She didn't talk too much or too in higher profile. Almost 2.5 years ago, 2 years, 5 months ago, or 4 months ago, immediately after the coalition was formed, people were talking about, hey, in terms of designing foreign policy, in whose hand is this? Is it in Chancellor's office? Or is it in Auswärtige Amt, in foreign office? More Green Party or more SPD? Can we say now in designing, I mean, not in a sense of implementation, but in designing foreign policy, the Chancellor office has his hand now, or not yet?
No, I think he interferes maybe, and he puts his foot down, you could say, where it is important to him. And the other stuff he leaves to Annalena Baerbock. But I think there's a lot of disagreement in, how to actually conduct foreign policy anywhere. And, I do think that Annalena Baerbock has a lot of strength, but sometimes she's also emotional, in particular when it comes to values. and that, she is collecting the experience and learning lessons. And I, for instance, thought, in the past, she was criticized a lot in Germany for being kind of for preaching morale constantly to other countries. But I think during her China visit, actually, she didn't do that anymore. So for me, it was a sign that she, was getting more experienced. She did address Taiwan, for instance, the issue of Taiwan, but she explained it in very economic terms. She pointed out what kind of economic losses the German industry would experience if there was a crisis in the Taiwan Strait, because of 70% of semiconductors being shipped through the Taiwan Strait and, the maritime routes. So she actually found a very Scholz-like language, you could even say, very trade, economic-based language to raise the issues that are important to her. So I think for Annalena Baerbock, it's learning by doing in many ways, while as Scholz is probably not really willing to learn anymore. He is set in his ways. So, you can see the differences, right? And there is a back and forth. But traditionally, since Merkel actually came into power, she has tried to centralize the power in the chancellery, and by that taking away increasing power from the foreign ministry. And I think this is still something we see until today. The structures are like this. The chancellery has the final say, This is why the China strategy, when you looked from the inside at the process of the China strategy, 1 year, more than 1 year went into drafting it. The whole foreign ministry, you could say, was working on it, drafting it. But in the end, it was the chancellery that went through it and crossed out, the paragraphs it didn't like.
Okay. Annalena Baerbock is clear, foreign office. But, they have two chairmen from Green Party. The other one is Robert Habeck, is the super economic minister. So what kind of role? Is Robert Habeck still dominant? In designing, not designing, in having something to say in terms of China, in dealing with China. What I mean
economic relationship. Yeah.
You mean 2 years ago, or a little bit more than 2 years ago, immediately after Russian attack towards Ukraine, Robert Habeck says, that's what I mentioned before. He said, we have to make sure that German business will be decoupled from Chinese market before 2027. So that if we sanction China after 2027 for attacking Taiwan, we don't have to pay high price. So that's what he said 2 years ago, a little bit more than 2 years ago in how to deal with China. Is he still, does Robert Habeck still have some power even in economic policy in dealing with China?
Yeah, I think he does. But as I said, he's not doing decoupling. I think this is very clear that whatever he might have said, there was a paper that his ministry came out with around the time when the first draft of the China strategy leaked. And that paper was very precise in how the economic ministry under Habeck thought the relationship to China should be designed. Starting from the issues of level playing field, market access, protecting our own national security in Germany, being more scrutinizing Chinese foreign investment better. A lot of issues. It's a very, very comprehensive paper. And up to the point of diversifying from the Chinese market. Not decoupling, but diversifying. That was before, I think, de-risking became the slogan. And this paper didn't get much attention. And what the economic ministry is doing is very low-key. So there's not a lot of media reporting. There are no big speeches. There's no Twitter and so on, like Scholz is doing it, who is, by the way, also on TikTok now since last week, Monday, I believe. So it's all very low profile, but in this way, Habeck is actually implementing the plans. He has been traveling a lot to Southeast Asia and speaking to economic ministers there and trying to actually, fill also the gaps that we can feel on the German market in terms of professionals acquiring, professionals in certain industries, also boosting the relationship to countries such as Australia or India in particular. So there's a lot of drive. But he's not the type of character who will then make a big media splash about it. So I think in many ways, actually, Habeck has become in the German public a very, very respected minister. Not in all of the public. I mean, we're also divided as a society in many ways. But he has also, I think, put a lot of calm on the German society when Ukraine war happened, and we all were fearing that, we will have no more gas and oil in the coming weeks. I mean, he has a very, very calm character. He's a very calm persona. So I think he still has a lot of power, but you cannot really see it.
Okay. Maybe the last two questions is one about this, the three conditions proposed by Olaf Scholz in Shanghai in terms of dealing with these three new industries. So can we say there will be different style of Germany in dealing with these three new industries compared with what America will be doing?
Yeah. I don't think that, as compared to also Brussels, I would say, but also as compared to Americans, Germany is not in favor. I think that's very obvious in imposing high tariffs on EVs or, going down any anti-dumping road. So I think there we have the division between the American friends and also some of the European member states and the European Commission. In the end, however, I think should the European Commission vote or decide on higher tariffs for China, and all the other member states or the majority of the other member states votes in favor of it, then Germany is not going to veto it. Germany will follow. But in the past, Germany will then tell China, for instance, it's not our fault. We didn't want it, but the others voted for it. So it's the fault of the European Commission. I mean, that was the strategy Merkel often applied, She was also very smart in that way. So I think that is what's going to happen in the end, what could happen in the end.
Okay. Angela, Germany can actually, play a role in stopping a war, trade war. Remember more than 10 years ago, the solar war.
Yes.
Chancellor Merkel, I think we want to contribute to her. She said, okay, let's talk. Let's negotiation.
Okay.
And
I hope someone can also say, look, this is against everybody's interest. Let's have a serious negotiation.
Yeah, well, let's see.
Can Scholz say that?
Yeah, the question is if he dares to say it.
If he dares to say it. If he can press.
But he will also be under fire from within Europe and from a lot of Germans as well.
We cannot ask Macron to do this because Macron...
Yeah, he has made it clear. Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah, because Zhongping's point is very important because we already heard some strong signals from Washington. The day before yesterday, on Tuesday, Catherine Tai, the trade representative of White House, already said they are seriously considering implementing the 301 action in sanction China, in imposing more high tariff towards these three new industries, in stopping more Chinese vehicle car coming to the United States, in lithium batteries, solar cells. Biden administration will be already starting. So Germany might play a role if Olaf Scholz dares. Okay, my last question is, in correlation with this, how are you guys to deal with the pressure coming from Washington? Because Olaf Scholz visits to China, obviously, more or less has been successful for Chinese side, for for German business side, Russia, Taiwan, as you mentioned, was the lowest part of agenda, and in these three new industries, Germany very clearly has followed different approach compared with the United States. Then, as I mentioned in first place at the very beginning, Washington has already said, "Oh, you got to be careful, so that China are not going to successfully divide Germany from the United States." So, how are you guys going to deal with the pressure, with the natural pressure from the United States?
Can I start?
Sorry.
Let me start.
Yes.
Okay, please.
I know our time is coming up.
Sure.
Peter, I think from the very beginning, Europeans are determined to say their interest on China is different from that of the United States. Okay, we are allies across the Atlantic, China, US, Europe. We have so much common interest. We're allies, but this does not mean our interest everywhere is equal. I think Washington perfectly understands this. The difficulties is at the moment, Europeans are relying on the United States in terms of the eastern neighborhood, Ukraine, and to certain degrees, Middle East. But Europeans are so disappointed about America's approach in Middle East. So, but as long as Ukraine is a problem, this part of the world is a problem, Europeans need to be very careful in dealing with their relations with the United States. Having said that, I think, Europeans are, including Chancellor Merkel, Scholz, are watching China-US relations closely. They try to figure out what is going on in terms of rhetoric, in terms of real deeds, actions. I think, last year, Xi Jinping's meeting with Joe Biden has set some positive, signals. This reduced Europeans' fears of U.S.-China rivalry to a, losing control degree. So all this comes out, all this factor come to one point is Europeans think, look, we have lost UK some years ago. United Kingdom left us. We have lost Russia's energy. Okay, this is not Europeans' fault. This is something else. We don't want to lose China. If we are not pushed to that position, we will never can imagine, to lose a big market like China. So I think these are all encouragements. All this element come together to encourage Scholz to make some approach which are not totally the same as Washington DC's.
Yeah.
Okay. Are you same optimistic like Tony?
I agree. I mean, of course, in many ways, the US are our partner in other ways as well, in values and so on. And there's a very close transatlantic partnership and alliance. And even Trump couldn't destroy it completely, even though he really tried. You have to also give it to him. He really tried, but he couldn't destroy it. So I think as long as Biden is still president, I think we can find a way. We will follow the US if hard comes to shove, as you say, if we have to. A good example was, I think, the CHIPS Act. We don't have so many semiconductor companies in Europe, but the Netherlands, and they followed the US, even though they did it grudgingly. And they finally found some compromise to still be in business with China, even though to a lesser degree, and where it didn't concern national security. So I think this is the issue. If it really concerns national security, we will give give way to the pressure of the US. We will follow the US. But if not, we can always negotiate with the US to see what can we maintain, what kind of relationship or cooperation can we maintain with China. Of course, the issue is when Trump is elected, because Trump might actually ask Europeans, blackmail them precisely, and tell them you will follow us, the US, 100% on the tariff war with China, or otherwise we will drop Ukraine. And then we have to follow the US, even though we don't want it, and we really don't want it, but I don't think the Europeans will have any other choice. So this is another reason why, we're terrified of Trump being reelected. But other than that, I think there are always ways to talk to each other. And you're right, Zhongping, the meeting between Biden and Xi last year, it was very promising, and it was a big relief to Germans or to Europeans to see that also the military dialogue can be resumed, even after all the trouble there has been, all the tension, because it showed the willingness of both powers to actually find a way to coexist and not to escalate. So I think for us, this was also the biggest worry in the years before that, including the balloon incident and all that. So I think we can end this episode optimistically until November at least.
Until November. Yeah, because next 7 months will be very critical, very interesting. And also, last but not least, next month will be also quite interesting in Taiwan, 20th of May. Exactly. Will be coming to. Will we still be staying in Taiwan on the 20th of May?
Yeah.
Okay. Then you can observe. You can observe on the spot. I
didn't get a seat.
Okay.
But I can follow his speech on television.
Okay.
Like you.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Angela. Thank you very much, Zhongping. I think it was very informative,
it was a great,
very constructive. Yeah, and very interesting as well. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Great pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
It will be also of interest for you as well. Thank you.
Yes.
Okay. I hope we can continue this. We can often and often.
Yes. Okay. Let me know if you plan to visit Berlin.
Okay. Sure.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Yeah. We'll organize something. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Say hello to your dad.
Have a nice day.
Yeah.
Bye.
Okay. Thank you. Okay.
Bye.
Okay. Bye.